Hi, this is StaticFireGal. Welcome to another episode of Total Space Network Rocket Series. In this episode, we will talk about the N1 moon rocket. We will learn why the N1 is called the moon rocket, and we will also get to know the legendary hero behind the Soviet N1 rocket. It was an amazing period for the Russians in the beginning of the 60s. They were far ahead of the space race. They had many achievements and advantages, including the first intercontinental ballistic missiles in 1957. They launched the first artificial Earth satellite, Sputnik 1, in October 1957, and then the first man in space, first woman in space, first 3 men in space, first extravehicular activity, first animal to orbit the Earth, and first spacecraft to hit the moon. The Soviet Union's achievements in space were down to a unique approach to rocket design, developed by the anonymous chief designer Sergei Korolev. Korolev was the key figure to Russia's unique approach to rocket design, a realistic hardware-based philosophy in which important design questions were only tested or resolved after full test flights. The engines use a unique technology developed by the Soviets at the height of the space race. The technology was so ambitious that even Western rocket scientists were completely baffled by these engines. Korolev's team was faced with a deadline beating the United States to develop enormous engines needed for the rocket. With Russia's lacking the kind of industrial infrastructure of the Americans, there would only be time to make small but highly efficient engines for the N1 rocket, a total of 30 for the first rocket stage. But the project was then struck a devastating blow. During routine surgery in January 1966, Korolev died. The one figure with the authority and vision to motivate the system behind the goal of beating Americans had gone. By 1967, the first N1 moon rocket had been assembled at the Cosmodrome, standing 35 stories high and weighing the same as 400 double-decker buses. Vasily Machine had been appointed to take over as chief designer of the N1 in the wake of Korolev's death. There was a change of course that doomed the N1. Russia had insufficient huge facilities needed to ground test all 30 N1 engines as a whole. The first launch would take place with the rocket and its system of closed-cycle engines still untested. There would be no other way but to finalize the same way that all other Russians had been perfected through a series of full test flights. At that time, all American and Soviet rocket engines worked using an open-cycle technology, in which the exhaust products of the preburner that drives the pumps are dumped over the side, a simple but wasteful design. But for the high-performance engines, Korolev demanded that inefficiency was unacceptable. The Soviet engine designers would have no choice but to take an unproven and highly risky step. They would have to close the cycle and find a way to safely channeling the exhaust products from preburner back into the combustion chamber to be refired. A potentially dangerous process, but one that can boost the lifting power of the rocket by 25%. Learning the new closed cycle technology with their experimental test-based approach would take time that the Soviets lacked in their race to beat America to the moon. The N1 had only 4 launches. The second launch actually exploded with the force of a small nuclear bomb, making an apocalyptic blast. While the debris was still scraped up from the floor of the Kazakh desert, the race to the moon had come to an end. Just 2 weeks after the N1 disaster, the Americans were celebrating victory in the wake of the successful Apollo 11 mission. The Soviets didn't give up. They have learned from their test failures. They have evolved the design of their engines. To prevent intake of debris, filters were fitted to the engines and the launch pad was rebuilt ready for the next test in 1971 and 1972. But unfortunately, none of the N1 rockets had made it all into the orbit. In 1974, the political imperative behind the moon race had now gone. As a result, the entire N1 program was cancelled on the orders of the Kremlin. After the cancellation of the program, the Soviet leadership ordered the complete destruction of
of all the remaining N1 rockets and their engines, but some engineers stole a few of the final NK-33 remaining engines, and they are using those engines to fly on Soyuz 2.1V. The Saturn V was taller, heavier, and had a greater payload capacity. N1 was a 3-stage launch vehicle with more liftoff thrust and a larger first stage diameter than the Saturn V. Saturn V used RP-1 fuel for the first stage, while the second and third stages used liquid hydrogen. The N1 used RG-1 rocket fuel, or rocket propellant 1, or refined petroleum. It is a highly refined form of kerosene outwardly similar to jet fuel used as rocket fuel, and the N1 used them in all 3 of its main stages.
The story of the N1 remained a shameful secret until the early 1990s, when with the fall of the Soviet Union, information started to trickle out. The N1 rocket was the mighty Soviet dragon that could never really fly. Hope you guys liked this video. Hit like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.